Hey guys, it's Quickie Baby and welcome back to another Quick Tank review. This week we are looking at the Su-101. This is the Tier 8 Russian tank destroyer. It's a very mobile, fast-firing beast of a tank destroyer that likes to outmaneuver its enemies and overwhelm them with very high DPM. If that sounds like the tank for you, stay tuned. I've got some gameplay coming right up. And if not, I'll tell you exactly how to take these things out effectively on the battlefield. So the Su-101 has less than 1,000 hit points. This is one of the problems that's pretty universal across the Tier 8 tank destroyers, except for example the AT-15. Having this low hit points means that you get 2 hit by most Tier 10 tanks, and you get 3 hit by most Tier 7 and Tier 8 tanks. So you've really got to try and stay out of harm's way, make sure you don't get hit by any artillery, and just pray that your armor holds up, because if it does penetrate you, you don't have the hit points to take many shots. Now the tank is very lightweight, it weighs less than 35 tons. And it has a fantastic 680 horsepower engine that really allows this thing to shift around the battlefield at its top speed limit of 54 kilometers an hour. Now the traverse speed on this tank is not bad for a tank destroyer, it's 36 degrees a second. And overall, that makes this one of the most mobile tank destroyers in the game at Tier 8, or Tier 9 or Tier 10 as a matter of fact. Now the armor on this tank is on paper 120 at the front, 90 at the side and 40 at the rear. Let's look at this in some more detail in WOT Tank Viewer. So here's our Su-101, and here is the armor profile for it. So on paper, the frontal armor of this tank was 120mm. However, this is the only part of the frontal armor that is indeed 120, that is the upper superstructure. And due to its angle, really, if you hit the upper superstructure on this tank, you are going to bounce. We can see there's also a ring of 150mm around the gun shield, but when we look at the hull armor, we can see that it is in fact 90. Now the upper plate is very well angled, but it is only 90mm thick. That means that very high caliber rounds are going to be able to penetrate this, but the angling on the lower plate is also rather good. What this means is that against lower tiered targets, as long as you angle your armor slightly, probably like this, you do have an excellent chance to bounce. We can see a part here that lots of people do not pay attention to. It seems to be some viewports at the front of the tank. When we look at the collision, we can see this is 90mm at the front and is quite a nice flat surface to pinpoint if you're in a close quarters combat with this tank. And this is because this tank doesn't have any cupolas. There's no prominent weak points on the top of the tank. Now the side armor is 75mm along both sides of the tank, as you can see here, all the way from the front to the back of the hull. But it isn't angled, so if somebody does manage to plant one into your side here, then it's very likely to penetrate you. You do have 15mm of spaced armor here, which seems to be angled in, which means that if they do hit this small part of your tank, there is a fairly okay chance that the shot might be absorbed. If you're tanking in the Su-101, I suggest to angle your tank like this. That means that the 70mm of armor on the side is going to be very hard to penetrate, and if they hit the front of your tank, it's going to be a bounce. Between your shots, even though this tank does have a very good rate of fire, you want to be going forwards and backwards just to make sure that they hopefully miss and either hit your superstructure or they hit your frontal armor on the upper plate, which at this angle will likely bounce. And we can see the side armor here is 90mm, but it is very well angled, which gives the tank a good chance to bounce from the side. The rear of the tank is garbage though. We can see it's 40mm, and we can actually see there's a door here. This door on the back is actually 5mm less, which is a very interesting feature. Top of this tank is quite vulnerable to artillery. As we can see, it's 20mm on the top, and although quite a small target, the Su-101, if it does get hit by artillery, can quite easily be one shot. Now the gun shield on this tank is quite interesting. There are many different levels of spaced armor on the front. As we can see, there's 100 in a very unorthodox shape here. There's 115 here. And then just surrounding the gun, there's 170mm of spaced armor. Behind the spaced armor, we can see that there is basically nothing. In fact, it's 0mm directly behind the gun shield. But it is an irregular shape, almost a square with this extra side bit here, that you have to hit. What this means is that if you hit outside this square, i.e. in this location over here or this location over here, it is very likely to bounce. Realistically, I would not recommend shooting these tanks in the gun, but if you have to, as long as you have a very high caliber gun or just extra high penetration, for example, on the Tier 9 or 10 medium tanks, then it might be an option for you. Still, in my opinion, finding the best angle on the front of the tank or on the side of the tank is going to be your best bet. So for all you prospective Su-101 drivers out there, you could be happy knowing that this tank has fairly troll kind of armor. It does pull off quite a few bounces, However, don't rely on it unless you really are top tier. So now we're going to look at the gun of this tank. Its top gun is 100mm, which fires 8.45 rounds a minute. That is very fast considering the alpha damage is 320. Now the penetration on this tank it's interesting. It's 219 with its standard rounds and 330 with its heat rounds. Having these heat rounds is really nice for being able to punch through the frontal armor of heavy tanks, even up to tier 10. And we can see that the accuracy on this tank is okay at 0.36. Now the aiming time, however, is fantastic at 2.1. This gun is comparable to, for example, the T-54. However, when mounted on the SU-101, it is just generally better. Now, when we compare this gun to, for example, the other Tier 8 Russian tank destroyer, they're completely worlds apart. The 152mm on the ISU-152 obviously has the alpha damage advantage, it has the penetration advantage, but it's much less accurate and its aim time is horrific in comparison. However, when you consider the alpha damage is so high, that aiming time is sort of mitigated. The real place that you don't want to have bad aim time is, for example, on the IS-3, which has 3.4 second aim time as far as I'm aware. But because of its 390 alpha damage and medium kind of rate of fire, that means the aim time, you really can feel it. Because effectively, the more you have to shoot, the more you have to aim. So lower alpha damage guns, which generally have much higher rate of fires, need to be using that aim time more often. Let's have a quick look in tank compare between the two tanks at tier 8 of the Russian tank destroyer tree. So here we have the SU-101 on the left and the ISU-152 on the right. The hit point advantage is, well, for the ISU-152, but only by 20, it's negligible. The speed limit is thoroughly in the hands of the SU-101, and also the speed limit back is significantly higher. Now the weight difference is substantial, which means that you really shouldn't be ramming anything in the SU-101 unless it literally is a light tank, and you guys can take advantage of that fact, especially if you're in the heavier mediums such as the E-50, Panther II, or even tanks such as the A-44. Now we've discussed the armor differences in depth. The ISU is basically a 90mm box, and apart from having that gigantic, very thick mantlet, the SU-101 does have the better armor. Now the engine power on the tanks is more or less similar. However, when we look at the horsepower to weight ratio, the SU-101 just simply kicks the ISU-152 into touch. The traverse speed as well, SU-101 all the way. The view range is in the hands of the SU-101. Now, of course, the alpha damage goes to the ISU-152, so does the penetration massively, with 67 more millimeters of penetration. However, as you can see here, the DPM of the SU-101 is actually higher than the ISU-152. Sure, you're going to have to hit a lot more shots, but in a straight-up fight, you will be doing more DPM. Now, just when you thought that this tank was too good to be true, yes it is, because it has 2 degrees, that's right, 2 degrees of gun depression. Some of the worst gun depression in the game. What this means is that you often have to overexpose yourself on slopes to be able to get shots on people, or really try and pick your fights on flat surfaces. And that gun depression really is one of the crippling factors on this tank, and is a massive downside to what would be, without this, probably one of the best tanks at tier 8. If you had gun depression in this tank, you could literally angle the armor at a fantastic level, hopefully hide your lower plate, and be nearly impenetrable. However, because the gun literally doesn't aim down, you often have to expose yourself like this, meaning the armor is a lot weaker. Anyway, that's quite enough discussion. Let's take a look at some gameplay and how the SU-101 performs when it is at top tier. So we join this battle on Karelia. I'm playing with Z and with Ike. And we just put out our first shot into this T-34. Now the kind of slopes that you see me on, where my tank is pointing slightly down, is entirely beneficial. We're able to quickly aim at a tank, the T-34 there, and pull back using our mobility before he's able to really aim at us and take an effective shot. So these are the kind of positions that you want to try and find yourself in, where hopefully you're trying to engage your enemies at long range, where you can use your accuracy and your generally higher penetration at equal tier. Now, being a little bit cheeky, we bounce a T-29 shell, and just look at how the gun goes up and down when I go over these slopes. You literally have to find positions where that 2 degrees of gun depression means that you can still engage your targets. And this doesn't look like a slope, but look, it literally is. I have to expose myself to be able to get shots onto the enemy. So we're looking for a shot there on the T-150. We hit his track. And my armor seems to be holding up pretty well at the moment. We just come round the corner, get a kill on the VK who fired an HE round at us. And this replay is to show an example of what the SU-101 can do when it's top tier. And it can play aggressively and use its speed limit to engage its enemies quite quickly. And get a lot from a smash and grab game. Then we track the Lurve, who manages to penetrate us. You can see right through our front plate. We do a drive-by on the KV-1S. And then go to finish him off, but Ike is just a little too quick for us. Okay, so we see a GW Panther. This is to give you an idea of the aim time. Which, if I was in an ISU-152, I would have most likely not been able to get that kill. Would have had to have fired it very clutch indeed. So here you can see the SU-101 is a very fast tank. We're progressing along the slope at 40 till we stop. Unfortunately, we bounced on the IS there. But just check out this engine power. It's more like a medium tank, which allows us to chase him down and finish him off. And wow, this game was absolutely brutal. It's really just to show you that when top tier, the SU-101 can take a lot of punishment. And it's also to show you that its mobility allows it to clean up really well at the end of games. There's nothing more frustrating than being in, for example, the Mouse or the T-95, or even, to a lesser extent, the ISU-152, that isn't able to bomb it down slopes at 60. It doesn't have great track traverse that allows it to bomb it around like a medium tank. And they simply can't get around and clean up like the SU-101 can. And that might be one of the attractive features to you guys. Maybe you want to have a very good gun at tier 8, just like what the SU-101 has. And also have the mobility to be able to really chase your enemies around the battlefield and put pressure on them. So we tried to fire clutch there to steal the top gun or confirm the top gun. I haven't done a very large amount of damage here. These have been mostly kill steals. We fire on the move at the Tiger there. He manages to penetrate us. But fortunately for us, our rate of fire... Oh, he leaves us on 2 health and gives us engine damage. And that, let me just pause it here for a second, is something that I forgot to mention in the garage. Unfortunately for the SU-101, the engine is literally at the front of the tank. So if your 90mm of armor doesn't hold up, which you've clearly seen didn't hold up against a Tiger, and it didn't hold up against the Lurva, what that means is that you will take a lot of engine damage. And originally, I used speed governors in this tank, and boy did I learn quickly that using speed governors in this tank is a really stupid idea. Since then I have changed the fire extinguisher, and I would almost recommend using automatic fire extinguishers on this tank, just so you can reduce the amount of fires that you get. If you do not have a lot of crew skills, I would also suggest to get preventative maintenance in this tank. A lot like the A44 as an example. It will mean that you take a hell of a lot less engine damage, and that will help you in the long run. Anyway, let's take a quick look at the post-game stats, see how we did. So that was what I would class a smash and grab game, aka where your team is overwhelmingly better than the enemy team, and you really want to just get as much out of it as quickly as possible. And the SU-101 is one of the best tanks for doing just that. This was a triple. We got nearly 6,000 experience for our triple, which was enough to get the mastery badge in the SU-101. We did 3,500 damage and confirmed the top gun at the end, and we took 7 hits, giving us a potential damage received of 1,850. We were left on 2 hit points at the end, and we also had engine damage. This might give you guys an indication of just how good the armor is on the SU-101, and just how brutal it is to only have 1,000 hit points. Even in these top tier games when we had lots of tier 7s and tier 6s shooting at us, we barely took double our hit points in potential damage. Still, I got to show you just how quickly we could travel 2.5 kilometers and chase down all of that lovely base experience. Now I'm going to show you a replay that emphasizes the difference between the ISU-152 in its alpha damage and the SU-101 with its 100mm. So here we go, we're playing in the SU-101 on Sand River. There are some tier 9 tanks against us. And here we see an IS-8 going after Ferdinand. So we failed to penetrate the IS-8 there with our first shot. It wasn't very well aimed. Now we're able to take his track off and really lock him down for the Ferdinand. The IS-8 repairs his track. We put another shot into it. Just note the rate of fire on this absolute beast. Put another shot into him, and I think I have the finishing shot. However, he's not interested. I'm waiting for him to reverse. Doesn't look like he wants to. Still waiting for him to reverse. He has disappeared now. We put one more into him and then we decide, okay, let's go down to finish him off. Just check out the mobility of the SU-101. It's more like a light tank or a medium tank in these kind of situations. And although he puts a very meaty shot into us, let's just take a look where that one went in. Yeah, right in the middle of the front plate. So, here's a good example of the 2 degrees of gun depression. Look just how much I have to expose myself. Unfortunately, the .36 accuracy there really does show itself. But this is a game that really wants to just show you how this gun fires at medium to long ranges. So we missed the super Pershing there, and we get penetrated by him. Because we're really having to expose most of our frontal armor. We miss him again. I'm really not having very much luck trying to engage those enemies at medium to long ranges. And as we can see, my armor really didn't hold up. The super Pershing was able to take my lower plate. However, it'd be much better if we were to use the IS-8 to get shots on the enemy. So I decided that position is not very effective and I'm not going to be getting many more shots on those guys. So I relocate over to here, keeping an eye to make sure I'm not about to get shot in the side. To be able to get some flanking shots off here. A nice meaty shot into the VK there. And you can see just how quickly our 320 alpha damage reloads. Bit of an opportunistic shot there. I didn't make it though. Now we're trying to get this M103 in the side. He turned slightly left just as we fired. We hit him in the front of the tank, which was not brilliant. However, the next one clearly goes in. I pull back, angle my armor, and we manage to bounce. We fire completely clutch there, and it goes right where we wanted it to put in another chunk of damage into that M103. Now I'm considering aiming at the super Pershing now. However, we do have a lot of tanks that are swarming down upon that position. It's not really my priority. I'm looking for shots on the M103. We don't have them. Just wondering what this T69 is doing below me. But, oh yes. So the gun depression, very good example of how far forwards you have to go. Look how far forwards we have to go to get our shots off. And that means that we have to expose ourselves to the T69. That 2 degrees of gun depression is just brutal in the SU-101. And if this tank had gun depression, I would be all over it. But look how far we have to expose ourselves to get a shot on the T69. Basically, unless there's a rock in front of you that you can barely see over, the enemy can just target your lower plate or your upper plate. And unless you're at very long ranges like this. Now these are the kind of shots that you can have a go at with the SU-101. 2 shots, 400 or 500 meters or whatever that was, right into the top of the turret of the IS-3. And in an ISU-152, you might not want to take those chances, or you might literally have to say a little prayer to RNG Jesus before ever you fire them. Now we're having a go at the T-69. He doesn't spot me. It's always nice. have another poke at him. And just to highlight again, that because of the rate of fire, I'm far more happy to take my chances in the SU-101. We can see that we actually managed to use our frontal armor to bounce a shot there because it was well angled. Always reverse at an angle, just as you would do in an ISU. Always angle your armor when you're about to take fire in the SU-101. So as I was saying, because of the 100mm rather than the 152, I'm far more happy to take what I would call opportunistic shots, or shots that have got very low chance to actually hit the target in the SU-101. And if you do miss, you've got another shell loaded in pretty darn quickly. Whereas in the ISU-152, sometimes you don't take those chances. And it swings and roundabouts, really. Obviously, it's better to get lucky with the 152mm and roll really high. However, because the gun is less accurate, the kind of ranges that you've seen me engaging in here, it might not do quite as well. So we've got one more shot to make on this M103, and there we go, right into his back. And that was quite a nice little example of what the SU-101 can do if it takes its pole position and just starts to dominate the map from there. This replay was to really show you the gun performance of the 100mm. Let's take a look at the post-game stats. So this was recorded during a 5x event and we got 10,875 experience for it. We finished top on damage doing just shy of 5,000 and we got 1,450 base experience. We managed to get 56 base defense points. There was never really that much pressure on the cap. We fired 25, hit 21, penetrated 18. And considering the chances, the sort of the low probability shots that we were making, that gives you an idea of what you can do with this .36 accuracy. Now let's take a look at our final gameplay, how the SU-101 fares against Tier 9 and Tier 10 tanks. So here we go, we're playing in the SU-101. This is a 47%er against Tier 9 and Tier 10 tanks. Well, at least half the team is Tier 9 and Tier 10, and we can see that the enemy do actually have some very skilled players in their Tier 10s. So, the SU-101 really cannot take hits from any of the enemy tanks. There are very few that we can really engage successfully with our armor. However, we can use our top speed to get into an advantageous position, and I quite often like to use binoculars and bushes with the SU-101 to get a large amount of spotting damage. Here we go, we've lit up these targets. We take a shot at the T-32 knowing I will be spotted. I pull back. I wait for a few seconds until everyone has been unspotted, which means that I won't be seen anymore, and then go back into the bush. Now fortunately for me, my 2 degrees of gun depression is not an inhibiting factor about this location. We can see our Jagdtiger down there. Our next victim, hopefully. Looks like he's stopping in the correct position, however. If he was to come forwards, we would have had some good shots on him. And in these kind of high-tier games, and even in any game really, I really recommend that you use the SU-100 as sort of like a forward scout. The kind of position that you see me in here, I know that I'm pretty safe in the bushes, and I've got 380 meters view range base, and then when we have our crew skills and our binoculars on top of that, we do have very high view range, almost up to the spotting max of 445. So I'm really just looking for the shots here. I'm going to see how this game develops. I wanted to show you a complete replay after the previous two were really rather quick ones. And there we can go. We spotted that AMX 5120 at about 445 meters, right at the cusp of our view range. We take a shot at him, and then everyone else does. And we don't even get spotted when we fire. Lovely. I rolled for 385, which is right at the top of this gun for its rolling. Its average is 320. And we just lapped up all of that spotting on that Tier 9 heavy tank. One thing I should mention as well is the SU-101's camera rating is rather good. It is better than the ISU-152's, especially when firing. I think when firing, roughly it is about 20% or 25% better with respect to camera rating than the ISU-152. Okay, so my team has taken the hill successfully, and you can see that my tank destroyers have started to maneuver into aggressive locations at B6. We've just spotted the enemy T-110E4 and the T-28 prototype. I'm thinking, okay, it's time to start to move out. I shouldn't have knocked down that tree there. Try to always avoid knocking down trees. It will give away your position for eagle-eyed opposition. But anyway, we're going to move into position. And I want to basically take this central location and just try and spot at further distances. Well, not at further distances, I want to get closer to the enemy. And oh god, we just got spotted by God knows what. Ouch. The T-30 puts one right into the top of our side armor there. However, he loses 1,200 of his health as well. That's not that bad of a trade. That T-30 is a very good player. I did just lose 3/4 of my health, but really you can't be surprised when you've only got 990 hit points that you lose 3/4 of your health when you get hit once in this tier 10 game. So that T-30 really paid the price for that. He did 75% damage to me, but he lost his entire life. And that's not a bad trade. And this forward position here on Malinovka is quite aggressive. Now we've spotted that the T-110E5 and the E4 is now down on the other flank. What that means is that really, apart from the Waffenträger, they don't have any really dangerous tanks over here. But I'm just remaining calm, considering I'm on such low hit points. I really feel that there's no use in me being adversely aggressive here. I poke up to try and get spots, but I pull back. And I got spotted for it as well. That tiny little poke got me spotted. So our team is slightly behind by 2 tanks here. It's a pretty close game. It's what you would expect from a 47%er where the enemy skilled players are in their top tier tanks. Here we can see the E4 is aggressively pushing over the west with the E5. Now this is payday in the SU-101. Put a great shot there into the Waffenträger. And thanks to our great rate of fire, we're able to secure the kill and put in a second shot. Now, just to think about that for a second, obviously the rate of fire on this tank is wonderful. I would have probably done 750 on average with my first shot in the ISU. And we fired clutch there against the T-110. We tracked him dead. Unfortunately, that .36 accuracy shows its ugly head and our shot misses. So we're unable to get some of that tasty experience on the T-110E5 there. So we spotted an ISU. Fire blind at him. I'm not sure if he hit him. Oh, there's a T-28 there as well. We look for a shot on him as well. We can't make it. And this is really touch and go. The enemy are ahead by 3 tanks. What I'm thinking right now is really we've just got to try and finish the people to the west. And then we've got to we've got to finish the people to the east and then try and deal with the fact that there are people on the west. Considering the ISU is on lower health now, it looks like I might have hit him. And we finish off our tier 8 counterpart there. So I'm just looking for a shot on this IS-3. I know I can't shoot behind the dead Tiger 2 there, so I'm aiming to the right of the Tiger 2. There's a Tiger 2 here, so I've got my gun cursor just pointed to the right of the Tiger 2 so I can know where my next shot will be. I decided that T-28 is not much of a threat, and I'm far more worried about the fact that there is an E4 and possibly a T-28 prototype and a T-34-2 that will be coming up the west. So I consider just going straight across, and then I think that will be a bad idea because I will get isolated. So, what I'm thinking is, let's get up on the hill, let's use our view range again, and just create that second angle on the enemy. I thought that I would be spotted if I go up the slope, so I wanted to go below. I'm just hoping that this Lurve hasn't spotted me here. Luckily for us, we don't get spotted, and our tier 10 tank destroyers make quick work of that Lurve. Alright, so this is probably one of the sort of the highlights of the game here. It's this decision for me to use the speed of the SU-101 to get up onto the hill. So interestingly, all of the tanks that were up on the hill have come down now. They've all gone into the same position. What they don't understand is that that will allow the E4, as an example, to keep his frontal armor to us. And we really want to have multiple angles on the enemy. Oh god, I got spotted there. So what am I thinking? I'm thinking there's probably a tank right down there in those bushes. But it looks like it was in fact the Jagdtiger, who went all the way down and around. The Jagdtiger, who was last spotted here, snuck down and around. And that's really turned the game on its head. Imagine if I was still down where the ISU-152 is. I would be completely ineffective. However, we used our great mobility to be able to sneak around and to turn the fight on the enemy again. So it's 3 versus 4. It's a damn good thing that I'm putting pressure on this E4 from this position. Fortunately, our gun depression is a limiting factor there. But we go forwards and backwards. Just don't quite have enough gun depression. Don't quite have it. Oh, I decide I have to relocate and I have to expose myself more to get the shot. But here we go. Put another great hit there into the E4. He spots us, but I feel like I can get a second one into the side of his turret. So we hit him again. Now he decides to aim his turret at us. I go for his track there, just to lock him down, and I pull back. And the Jagdpanzer E100 manages to kill the E4 with a very long range shot indeed. That was a huge shot by our Jägeru. And I'm pretty sure it was me who was spotting there that allowed that Jägeru to be able to get that shot off. So now we can see the Jagdtiger against us. We've got his back. Or his side. Nope, looks like it's his back as he's reversing towards us. And just look at how fast the SU-101 can relocate. We've totally changed the angle of engagement using our mobility. And I load a heat round here. Because really the superstructure of the IS-3 is not a viable target without the heat rounds. We managed to sneak into a bush, catch the Jagdtiger completely out in the open, who was going for us. He was thinking that we were still up on the hill. We would have had a nice shot into his side there. But the Jägeru managed to take him out. So I feel that this replay was a textbook example of how the SU-101 should approach a tier 10 game. You don't have the alpha damage or the armor to trade effectively with tier 10s. However, you do have the speed and mobility to maybe get into that initial bush location, spot your enemies, provide some eyes for your team. Try and survive for as long as possible, and then use your mobility to change the angle of engagement. Let's take a look at the post-game stats. So that was a 4,122 experience double in that tier 10 game. We can see here that we did in fact hit the ISU-152 with that blind shot. So we finished 3rd on damage, which you will have to expect when you've got tier 10 tank destroyers on your team. However, if we order it by experience, we got 1,374 base, which was much higher than the tier 10s. And that's because of the 4,000 spotting damage that we did. So we got 1,365 spotting against that 5120 at the beginning. We spotted the E4 for the Jägeru at the end with that game-changing play and got 672 spotting damage for that. 444 against the T30, 1,208 against the T32, and a measly 18 against the Tiger 2. So, we only took 1 hit that entire game, and it penetrated, and we lost 75% of our health. And that's what you're going to have to expect if you play these tier 8 tank destroyers. Unlike the tier 9s, which can literally take an absolute punishment, the tier 8s really need a bit more of a sneaky approach. The tier 8s generally have very, very good DPM. However, their armor and their hit points means that if they trade, then they're probably going to come off even with a tier 8 heavy as an example. All of these factors have allowed me to get fairly respectable stats in the SU-101. My win ratio is fairly high, probably because I play this tank mostly in platoons. We do average 1.5 kills a game and just shy of 2,000 damage a game. When we compare this to the ISU-152 as an example, I averaged 2,600 damage a game in the ISU-152. However, I get less overall experience. I also average over 2 kills a game in the ISU-152. And what that probably is because in the SU-101, I do a lot more spotting. On average, I spot 2 enemies a game in the SU-101, whereas in the ISU-152, it's half of that. Whereas the ISU-152 is probably undoubtedly the better trader, and the better tank for just sheer brutality, just coming out and just almost completely taking out tanks with its 750 alpha damage. However, the SU-101, I do get a hell of a lot more spotting damage due to the mobility and the sneaky nature of the tank. And so that might be why my win ratio is actually better in the SU-101 than the ISU-152. Allowing your team to do more damage is just as important as doing the damage yourself. And that's something that the SU-101 can do effectively. Now, personally, I'm not too keen on the SU-101. Now, I think it's a great tank, and I fully recommend it, and it can have some fantastic achievements in the game. However, I just don't think it's quite the tank for me. If I want to play that scouting role, I'd rather play a medium tank. If I want to play that tank destroyer role, I'd probably rather play the ISU-152. The SU-101 feels more like a niche tank that will appeal to the people for the attributes that I've discussed, really. If you want a highly mobile tank that still has very high DPM and uses its mobility to sort of out-sneak its opponents, then that's going to be the tank for you. However, for me personally, that's not quite the gameplay that I'm into. And when I combine this with the 2 degrees of gun depression in the SU-101, which really, it just frustrates me so much. It's probably one of the reasons why I won't be keeping this tank, but I still fully recommend it. Anyway guys, I hope you've enjoyed this review. If you have, please consider rating it down below, and let me know what you think about the SU-101 in the comments. Have you been able to make it work? Do you agree or disagree with the things I've been saying in this video? Let me know what you think. As always guys, thank you so much for watching, you've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.